Hi, and welcome to Dockside with Deb. In this weekly show, we'll talk to people who are doing some pretty cool things in sailing and experts in their field. I'm Deborah Diel, sailor, founder of MySail, and your host for today. Dockside with Deb is recorded live, so you can join in and ask your own questions. To find out more, head to mysail.team/docksideWithDeb. Let's get started. And big thanks to Peter Lewis, Middle Harbour Yacht Club Commodore, as well, for joining us as my guest speaker tonight. We'll get going now. So Peter, first of all, I just wanted to get a little bit of your history and your sailing history. How did you get involved in sailing? What have you done? Give us some of your kind of sailing background.
Sure, Deb, and thank you very much for having me along. I started sailing in Georges River, for those that don't know it, in southern Sydney, and I was sailing on Manly Juniors, and in my day Manly Juniors were a little timber boat with a snub nose, and it was pretty much the learning boat for all of us, and then graduated to skiffs in terms of Moss and VJs, and sailed around Georges River, Botany Bay, and that's where I guess got my love for sailing. I also learned how to get stung by jellyfish as I fell in the water from time to time, and then graduated to big boat sailing about 30 years ago, I guess, and started around the club circuit. Did quite a bit overseas through my business. So I sailed in Sweden, Ireland, France. So I did a lot in the colder areas, the colder climes. Particularly the west coast of Sweden, and also did a transatlantic, a big race called the Transit des Elysées that happens once every 4 years. It's normally done on the trade winds that come off Africa, but unfortunately for us, we got hit by a hurricane depression, and half the fleet was knocked out and ended up in the Canary Islands. We unfortunately were not that lucky. We kept sailing, and it was quite a gruesome ride for about a week and a half, and then things settled down until we hit the doldrums. We went a lot further south than we wanted to, so we went from the sublime to the gulline. So that was very much
interesting. I haven't heard of that race. Maybe you can kind of just tell us a little bit more about that particular race and that experience.
Yeah, sure. Well, the Elysées, I worked and was associated with a big company in France. The French, as you know, are mad transit sailors. This race was invented for everyone to be involved in, so it's very much a European race. And as I say, it happens once every 4 years. The Elysées is the trade winds that come off Africa. So that particular race that I was in, I was lucky enough to be in a Whitbread boat, which was, for those that have been around sailing, it was Eric Taberlet's last boat, Penduic 6. And so it was a 60-footer, quite a heavy, well-built boat, thank goodness, because we did really hit very, very bad weather. And we struggled for quite a few days and nights to keep ourselves afloat. So the Elysées, we started in a place called Lagos in Portugal. That's the south of Portugal, and you generally end up in the French Antilles. So we ended up in Guadeloupe and finished in Guadeloupe. What's interesting is that race was a very long race because of the carnage that was caused in with the fleet. As I say, half the fleet ended up going back to Canary Islands. One mad Swedish guy sailed all the way back to Lagos because his mast had come down, restarted the race. I had had a holiday post-race with my family in France and Europe, and he was still sailing when I got back to Australia. So you know, it's amazing what people do. But a great race. It had a fleet, would you believe, a fleet of 700 boats when we started out. So a big fleet.
Wow, massive. Yeah, we don't get those kind of numbers in Australia, do we?
No. The other one that comes to mind that was probably one that I, from the overseas area too, was the Cork Regatta, and I recommend that to anyone from around the world. Again, amazing weather in terms of in one day you get 35 knots, rain in your face, hail in your face, back to sunshine, back to rain, and then you've got 7-knot tides. So very, very hectic conditions, and every day is on a different course. You rotate through the courses, and it's just an amazing regatta, amazing event. And again, I was there in the halcyon days back in 2008, I think that one was, and that there was about 700 boats at that. So, you know, awesome big fleets. So yeah, so that was the overseas stuff. Locally in Australia, I've been more associated with cruiser races. I know you're aware I'm a brand ambassador for Jeanneau, and most people in the Jeanneau world know who I am. And so sailed anything from the 30-footers through to the bigger boats. Currently sailing a boat called Savar, which you can see behind me. She's a 440. She's actually got a waterline length of 42 feet. And my style of sailing is I love the long distance. I like going to Hamo, like the cruise up as much as I like doing the race week and you know, longer races, cruising races. One that I've liked, different club, but one that I've liked a lot is the short haul racing, which is good fun. Old men having fun doing various things, both nighttime, offshore, inshore, and all those sorts of things. So anything that sort of varies it and mixes it up is what I like to do.
Yeah, nice. And how long have you been a member and sailing at Middle Harbour Yacht Club?
Yes, well, you know, as Commodore, I should say that I've been there for 40 years because I actually have, but actually my membership card says something like 20 years, I think. But I started sailing there. I sailed at like a lot of people, I sailed at a lot of clubs, but Middle Harbour's always been the club that I've favoured and always been the club that I'd love to sail out of. But yes, officially as a member, but I've been sailing there for 40 years. So there we are.
Yeah, great. And what was your progression to becoming the Commodore? I guess kind of what made you want to take up that role, and how did you kind of go from starting your volunteering or getting involved in the club?
Well, that goes way back. Look, I say this now as Commodore. We survive at Middle Harbour on our volunteers. I guess I'm a volunteer addict. I have done a lot of volunteer work for charities, and one of the ones that I've mentioned tonight is the Making Waves Foundation, which I see as very much a charity of sailors. That's the old Sailors with Disabilities, but because of the spread that we've done with the programs we deliver, we have changed the name just recently to Making Waves. So I've been a natural volunteer, if you like. So I guess my volunteering started doing very simple things. I was someone who got involved with the men's shed of the club and doing odd jobs around the place. I then graduated to the Marina Committee. And Tony Bates, who is a past Commodore and a fabulous guy, got me onto the Marina Committee, and that was involved firstly with the first marina that we built at Middle Harbour, and then the second one. And I was much more involved with the second one than the first one, and I spent some years on that, marketing the marina and being involved with the extension to our marina and all that goes with it. Then I got dragged into being club captain, and our club captain looks after membership at the club, and it's kind of a natural progression. I then became Commodore. I've been Commodore now. With our change of constitution, I was under the old constitution. I'd been Commodore for a year, and then I was re-elected for a 3-year period, which is coming to an end, and I'll be standing again. I don't know why, but I'll be standing again. And, hopefully everyone's happy with the direction of the club and what we're trying to achieve at Middle Harbour.
Yeah, okay. And that's, talk about what you're trying to achieve. The club recently had its 80th anniversary. And, you know, over the past 80 years, there's obviously been a lot of changes in the sport and how people participate in the sport and just lifestyles in general. And if we think about, you know, how things have progressed and looking to the future and what we want to, you know, what the club's trying to do with the future, especially around participation, what are some of the things that the club is looking at from a strategic point of view to kind of stay relevant, keep participation up, and keep membership up?
Yeah, that's a big question with a lot of complex things that have to be addressed. Look, we're no different to any club, I suspect, around the world. The world is changing when it comes to sailing. When I started at Middle Harbour, so I spoke about 40 years ago, Saturday racing was what everyone did, and everyone went out Saturdays. It was every day in Australia because we're so blessed with this weather. Unlike my friend in Sweden who has his boat in the water for about 6 weeks and that's it, we of course sail all year round. So Saturday racing was where it was at, and we had big fleets. Much smaller boats, though, I might point out. So we have big fleets, but our crews might have been an average size of 5. As you get bigger, of course, you need more people and so on in that area. Lots of people talk about it. I've talked about it with Commodores of other clubs here in Sydney, in Australia, and also around the world. And they all struggle with how do you run a club that's relevant and keeps racing. I'm proud of what we achieve at Middle Harbour. I think our sailing program is a very good one. We do sail all year round. We've got very strong fleets through the week. I've come off the boat today on a Wednesday race, for instance, and look, I can't tell you exactly how many were in there, but it was a very full day, a full fleet, a couple of divisions, probably about 40 boats, maybe 50 boats, which is a very good fleet, and it's steady at that sort of level. Twilight racing has been a big growth for us, and so has feature events. The challenge for us as a club has been where do we fit and what do we do? And that's the same for many clubs. What we did is we sat down about 2 or 3 years ago and we did a complete review of what is it we're trying to achieve with Middle Harbour. And some of the things were around what are we trying to do with the facility of the club. Some of the things were about what are we going to do about racing at the club. And the other things are how are we going to make the club sustainable. Out of that came some scary goals. One of the goals we have is to build our facility over the next 7 years to be a facility much grander than it is now, and I make no bones about that. Our aim is we're blessed because we have the elite athletes of Australia in sailing out of Middle Harbour, but our aim is to build a facility that is even better to house our Olympians and also make sure that they get the things that take sailing to the 21st century. One that's big on my mind is both disabled and challenged sailors need to be able to be looked after, and we need to have special facilities for them. And then youth and junior sailing is a big area that's important to the club. We have a massive junior fleet. It's a big commitment to the club, and we need to have the facilities that they need to leapfrog, because there is no doubt in my mind around the world everyone else is trying to make the best facility for club racing and elite racing, and also teaching people the skills of sailing. And all of that has to be dovetailed with the person that wants to come down, experience, just see it day to day. We get a lot of people that just come in as visitors and we take sailing. And we also have a hugely active cruising division. And that cruising division develops a lot of sailors that go around the world. We've had someone who's just done a double circumnavigation. They often go away long distance. They've done Lord Howe trips, they've done Tasmanian trips, etc. So look, we need to develop the facilities to do that, and money is not ever easy to find. And but we've built a foundation that is now collecting money for some of the things that we want to achieve at the club. We've already started breaking ground on some new facility changes, which are stage one of many changes. And the bigger plans are actually quite big. And we hope that with the cooperation of our neighbours and so on, we'll be able to build a facility that's truly 21st century. So it's about looking forward. the spirit of the club is huge and the willingness is huge, but sometimes we just need to put the nose to the grindstone and make these things happen.
Yeah, and that's interesting, the facilities as well. And for people who aren't familiar with Middle Harbour, I'm also slightly biased because that's my home club, but has a very beautiful outlook and a beautiful beach. And so, you know, the club definitely has some kind of, I guess, natural facilities there that are really attractive to people, especially, you know, if you're sailing dinghies and the youth sailing, as you mentioned, as well. Kind of coming off of that, so we talked about youth sailing, and one of the things, you know, that I've noticed and that seems quite prevalent in sailing is that, you know, you get youth and junior sailing, and then people get a bit older and they get busy and they go to university and they do all these other things and they kind of fall out of sailing, and then, you know, maybe come back in 20 years later. And I know this is kind of a challenge to try to keep people engaged and keep people sailing during that time period as well. And of course, you know, when you're in your 20s and 30s, it's a great time to be out there as crew, crewing on kind of yachts and stuff as well, while you're kind of young and fit. So any thoughts around how we can keep people engaged during that time, or anything that the club's done that's been successful in that kind of regards?
Yeah, look, what you're saying is such a relevant topic that it's not funny. You can draw a curve, so you can get your 7-8-year-olds up to your even up to your 15-16-year-olds, and you can keep building and building and building and find them quite large numbers, and they build. And we find that at Middle Harbour, as do other clubs, I might add, that are involved in youth sailing. Then what happens is they reach the serious part of their education in terms of schooling. They have to go off to college or university in this country, or whatever they're going to do. And then they fall very quickly into marriage, etc., and the needs of marriage and so on. And then they come out and the numbers start to build again. So you get a curve that sort of goes up, then comes down and goes away, and then starts building again. And in our sport, we can keep post 50-year-old, you could keep people operating right through to 90. And we do that regularly here at Middle Harbour. We've got a lot of members that have sailed right up into their 90s. Some have sailed literally to the day that they've died. And, you know, although that's sad, I also see that as fantastic. I think the challenge is, you can overlay that same graph, and it has been done by smarter people than me. You can overlay that graph on other sports, and it's exactly the same. You know, the trick is, what you've got to do is give them something to come back to, so that they don't forget you. And that's what we're trying to do with facility. And some of the dreams I have are sometimes a bit higher than we can achieve. But for instance, a family, and I have grandchildren and so on, a family can come down to our club, they can sit on the beach, the kids can play, the kids can then go and sail, and that is helping the youth of yesterday become the sailors of tomorrow. Because if they get back involved at the club in a different way, they will then, I hope, participate when they can. Now, you've only got to look at my sailing career. It's exactly the same. I was exactly that way. So I sailed as a youth, all sorts of skiffs, you know, sailed anytime I could and all the rest of it. I didn't get into big boat sailing. I only sailed skiffs and things like that. Got into serious school, career, all of those sorts of things, traveled for business. And I was away from it for probably the better part of, 15 years, and then started again. And why did I start again? Well, all sorts of reasons. But I was engaged with the club, as it happens, all the way through there, because I'd go down and have drinks. I'd even go down and have business meetings down at the club. So we've got to, I think what we've got to do is we've got to be realistic about what people can do. The other thing you've got to do is you've got to realise it's a bit like in our country, as you know, Deb, cricket is a game that goes on forever. And what they've done is they've come up with different forms of the game to suit people's needs. The other thing that we've noticed at Middle Harbour, which has been very good for us, is one design sailing. And generally one design sailing is once a month in terms of that. So we've got the MC38s, the Adams sailing group. They sail every week, but other one designs like our Far 40s, etc., they are racing roughly once a month in a regatta. They do it for 2 or 3 days. That's their sailing, and that seems to be much easier for people to do. So if that's the case, we have to move with the times and understand. So you've got to keep reflecting your programs around what people's needs are. So, you know, that's what we've tried to achieve, and I think we're getting there. Another thing that we've done to great effect is we have 12 feature events that happen once a month, roughly, and we encourage the entire club to go in those feature events. And those events have a theme around them. They go for long distance, well, relatively long distance. It's a good day sail. So we have things like the Chaos Cup or our 2-Up Cup that go all the way up the harbour and back around all the islands, all the rest of it. Extremely popular, and we bring it back. You can't be all things to all people. You have to specialise, and you have to try and design your programs to work that way. And you've got to look at what other clubs are doing and not necessarily copy, but say, how do we complement what they're doing? You know. The other thing, just one last thing on that. One thing that I've noticed, and it has been happening more and more, is the cooperation between the clubs on Sydney Harbour to achieve just that. You know, to complement our programs, to help each other with our programs and our development. And that's an important part of it. If individually, you will fail. So yeah, so that's the sorts of things we're doing.
Yeah, that's interesting. And actually, that's where I was going to ask, is around the cooperation between the clubs. Because as you said, Sydney Harbour, there's lots of different clubs with different kind of competing racing schedules. And, you know, people can't obviously be in 2 places at one time. So tell us a little bit more about that. How, you know, does the club design its program so that it is cooperating with other clubs, and so that, you know, people who are, you know, sailing with different events which might suit them if they're going to do some offshore racing as well as inshore, as well as, you know, different levels of kind of competitiveness. How does the club kind of manage that aspect?
Yeah, well, that's where, as everyone knows, we've been involved in the COVID-19 crisis, and as part of that, we have had a working group of the Commodores from all the clubs in Sydney Harbour and beyond, up at Pittwater. Again, for those that don't know our area, we're blessed with waterways, so we're very lucky. So all the Commodores were getting together, and what we decided very early on is we have to do everything in lockstep, because we represent our sport. Whatever we do, we wanted to have a combined approach to how do we manage through this crisis, and we involved Australian sailing in this. And I've got to say, what was probably started out as a very negative experience, there was some very good positives out of it. As I've heard in business, there has been a lot of positives out of COVID as well. Not for everyone, but it's amazing what we do when we've got our backs to the wall. As part of that, we've been discussing how do we keep that going, take the lessons from that, and work our programs together. So the easy thing for us is to work out what our specialty is. And I'll give you an example. We run a regatta on Sydney Harbour called the Sydney Harbour Regatta. We could not possibly pull that together without every club in Sydney and beyond helping us actually run the regatta. It's a very big regatta, and it's a celebration of sailing. And every club, Commodore gets involved, every club gets involved. We use their equipment, their resources, and everything else. So the very first step is to say, okay, what are you guys doing? And then say, how do we fit our program about what you're doing so that we're not competing, we're complementing each other. There is also a level of expertise that certain clubs focus on. So there is a very famous club that runs a very famous race in Australia. So I won't name the club, but I think you can guess who it is. And that little boat race wanders down the coast to a place called Hobart once a year. They've concentrated very strongly on a lot of offshore events and so on. And so what we've tried to do at Middle Harbour is said, okay, well that's fine, but where's our expertise? And we've worked more on the harbour itself and run a lot more inshore events and try and complement the event that's already been running, because everyone's got their expertise. Second thing is geographically, some clubs are a bit too far away for some boats to go to. So there's also this sort of middle ground where it might be that people on the southern part of our shores get together, and other clubs on the more southern area get together. I think we need to do more of this on the northern side, because at Middle Harbour, again, it's more northern. Get together with the northern side clubs and try and complement what they're doing and run programs together. It reduces costs overall. It reduces heartache. And so by sharing this, and look, this spirit of cooperation actually, it's only been underlined, I have to say, because it's been going on for some time. It's just that it's been absolutely underlined by COVID-19. So I think there's those sorts of things that we can work on. I think there's a lot more that we can do together as clubs. And you know, I know you're going to ask the question, but after COVID-19 or during COVID-19, we were sort of saying, well, what are we going to do to celebrate the fact that we're out? And we came up with a concept called the Breakout Regatta, which all the Commodores jumped on the back of. And we've got this fabulous event that's happening in August that's going to just celebrate sailing, from cruising to two-handed to big racing. And it's going to be a fabulous week. And it's going to involve all the clubs, which is great.
Yeah, and well, let's talk a little bit more about that, because that's a new event that has, like you said, it's come out of COVID-19, and I think it's really, you know, for people who aren't familiar, it's called the Breakout Series 2020. Great name. Everyone's kind of been stuck, and you know, a few of the kind of events that are very popular around here, one of them is Port Stephens Race Week, was cancelled, and this kind of gives you some of that, from what I understand, is going to kind of give you some of that type of racing that people may have missed by not being able to do that, and not being able to, say, necessarily go north. So it's kind of designed as a get back into sailing, let's celebrate, let's cooperate type of event. Yeah. And please, Peter, this was kind of your brainchild, as well as a few other Commodores, as you said. Tell us a little bit more about this event.
So, Deb, I'm a shameless Port Stephens fan. Again, for those that don't know about Port Stephens, and for those of your community that are either not in Sydney or from overseas, Port Stephens is one of the most beautiful places in the world, I believe. And you know, I've been to lots of places in the world, and there's lots of other beautiful places, but I love Port Stephens. It's on our back doorstep. So it's about 90 nautical miles from Sydney. Port Stephens has it all. It has island racing and has big bays. It has lots of sandbars, and for those that have been there, have done that. I think we're in our 14th year. So about 14 years ago, about 7 or 8 of us went to the inaugural Port Stephens Regatta, organised by my good friend from Newcastle Yacht Club, Paul O'Rourke, and a few other cohorts. And that has grown to a regatta now limited by the amount of berths in Port Stephens. Happens just after Easter or just before. The concept of Port Stephens, to me, is near and dear to my heart. The concept is involvement. So the concept is it has a 3-day regatta, which is for everyone, and it's purposely built into the school holidays, and that means kids can participate, and it's the spirit of the regatta that's important. In fact, the most favourite prize to win is the spirit of the regatta. The sailing is excellent, and they've often had the IRC championships involved and all of that sort of thing, but it's the spirit of the regatta that goes. Then there's a lay day, and then there's another 3 days up at Port Stephens, which is great. So it was with that spirit that we said, hey, what about we try and do something in August before the season starts to celebrate the fact that we can actually go sailing again. And luckily in our country, and you know, we are truly blessed in Australia that we don't have a large amount of the virus in Australia. Our borders are relatively closed, and it looks like, well, number one, we can go sailing, but it also looks like we'll probably be able to have pretty good functions. So the concept is this: we're going to leave Sydney, so we race to Sydney and or cruise. So we've got straight cruises that will wander up the coast. We end up at Royal Prince Alfred Yacht Club with the overflow at Royal Motor Yacht Club, and there will be a party at Royal Prince Alfred Yacht Club, and then overnight, and then we head to Newcastle, party at Newcastle. Get the party theme here, Deb. I know you don't like parties, but you know I do.
You will not see me at any of those parties.
No, and you won't see me either. So at Newcastle, and then we do a race which is from Newcastle to Port Stephens. We arrive this year. It's a little bit different. It's Soldiers Point, which is going to be up the top end of the bay. We normally are more central at Nelson Bay, and there will be a welcome party there. Then a lay day. Then there'll be 3 days of racing, both offshore and inshore, and then cruise home at your leisure. And some of us, may not be you, Deb, but some of us are thinking, well, we might just stretch it out a bit and hang around Port Stephens and watch the whales go by and things like that. Heard tell of someone in our club who remained nameless, who has 2 boats, and to support us, he's running 1 boat in the Breakout Regatta, and his delivery crew is sending his boat to Hamilton Island for race week, which has just been announced, albeit in a limited form, and then he'll get off his boat in Port Stephens and head to Hamilton Island and go racing there too. Half his luck.
Must be nice. A lot of parties.
Nice. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, that's right. So look, that's the concept of it, and it's the spirit of it. So the cruising division, our cruising division, has put together, a whole lot of programs for the cruisers. We've got racing. We've also got 2-handed. There'll also be prizes. I know this is near and dear to your heart, Deb, and I am remiss for not saying about some of the things that we've been programs both at Middle Harbour, but generally about raising female talented sailors. So there'll be prizes for the boats that have the most females on board. Well, there'll be points awarded for the most females on board. And if there's all female crews, obviously they will be favoured in terms of where they go. So we're doing that. The other thing we're throwing in is youth sailing. So there'll be points and handicaps given for people that have more youth on their boat to encourage people to go. The only downside is I looked at it, as you know, I looked at it only a couple of minutes ago. We've got 32 boats already registered. We haven't even done the full marketing of it, and we're limited to 60 boats because of berthing, particularly at Newcastle, but also elsewhere. So that's a good problem to have. But if we get 60 boats to the Breakout Regatta, who knows? We might be able to create something that just gets added into the calendar. So yeah, it's kind of the old style thing. We used to have a thing called Junior Offshore Group, joggy regattas, which I used to just love, which is the partying was as important as the sailing, and the destination was as important as getting there. Unfortunately, that died in this country, and I think it's something that could come back because it was very affordable sailing around the 30-foot mark. I think we could look to that. Sailing's not getting any cheaper, so maybe we should be looking at developing smaller boats series and things like that as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting you said that, like, this is a good format because it's 3 kind of day races up for people who may not be experienced to do lawn offshore race, or they may just not want to do that, or if they have a smaller boat, of course it's easier to do it in those shorter stints and then get up to Port Stephens and then have the 3 days, as you said, in Port Stephens. Yeah. So you get a little bit of those offshore passages as well as the racing in Port Stephens.
Yeah, that's right. And look, I cut my teeth on joggy type stuff, and you learn a lot very quickly, enough to know that, hey, I can do this. I mean, one of the barriers to entry to this sport is a whole lot of words made up by a whole lot of naval people 300 years ago that we still use so that we can sound really smart to each other. The second thing is, we run hard when we race, and I support that. But we've also got to remember how daunting it is, and it's hard to remember how daunting it is when it's your first time on a start line, your first time offshore, in a bit of a blow and things like that. So, mentoring people into the sport, that's what the Jeanneau Ambassador role is about, really. The Jeanneau Ambassador role is about getting people to use their boats. And I've got all sorts of stories where we've had people that really haven't used their boats very much, have ended up taking their boat to Hamilton Island, which is, let's face it, it's a long way to go, it's quite a program. And then to go racing, as you know, also the Hamilton Island Race Week, the racing's pretty competitive. It's quite challenging with tides, current, winds, and all that sort of thing. and then bring their boats back. And all of a sudden they go, wow, how long's this been going on? And it's taking them feeling safe that they can do it, getting their boat prepared. How do you get your boat prepared and all of that sort of thing? We've got an example of that. We've got a boat at Middle Harbour that's doing Hobart this year for the first time. And one of our very good mentors around the club, who remain nameless, is helping that boat get the boat together, getting them organised. They're good sailors, but they haven't done Hobart before, and just getting over that hump to say, yeah, you can do it, but you've got to do it this way, and learning how to do it gets another boat out there, and we've got to do that. And the Breakout Series is perfect.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, because it's like you said, I mean, Hamilton Island for a new skipper would be very daunting. I mean, it's fantastic, but it's a long way. It's a hard place to sail if you're not super, familiar with racing, or with, navigating around the islands, around the tides, around the currents. So it would be really, really challenging. So Port Stephens is kind of a good little stepping stone.
And it's got similar things, hasn't it? It's got islands, right? Not as many, but it's got islands. It's got sandbars. It's got current, and it's a short trip. And then you encourage them to extend the trip. All of a sudden, you find you've got more people going north. And for us in Australia, we seem to think that that's important. I do.
Go kind of migrate with the whales.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. And look, and you touched on the prizes for the Breakout Series. Tell us a little bit about how is it going to be kind of every day? Is there going to be awards, or is it going to be an overall? How is that working?
Everybody's a winner, Deb. No, we'll have prizes, daily prizes for each race. Each race is run individually, so they're all different offshore races. So we've got four clubs ostensibly organising. So Port Stephens Yacht Club, Newcastle Yacht Club, Royal Prince Alfred Yacht Club, and Middle Harbour Yacht Club. So for our section, we'll be responsible for the prizes there. So that'll happen obviously after the first leg, and then the second leg, etc. And then there'll be daily prizes in Port Stephens for each race, and then there'll be a series winner, first, second, and third series winner. Yeah. So we're very lucky, because there's a lot of people very supportive of making this happen, and so people have come out of the woodwork to help us, which is great.
Yeah, amazing. And you mentioned as well about the female participation. Do you have any all-female crews?
I don't know at this stage, because obviously we've got the boats entered. We will know, and we will be following that through. So it's important to us. Again, not my program, a program that's been adopted by Australian Sailing as She Sails. I'm very supportive. We are stupid if we don't include more women in sailing, and we've got to help more women get to the level of sailing big boats. There are boats, very good female skippers and things. We have some fabulous ones in Australia, and navigators and so on and so forth, but there's not enough, and we need to encourage them into the sport. And I think by making them aware and giving them totems of success, that we're aware that, hey, you guys have done this, I think is a great help.
Yeah, no, so absolutely. So anyone listening, if you want to put together a women's crew to do the Breakout Series 2020,
absolutely.
That's being
actually, I know a couple of crews of all female crews. So I'm looking at you girls. There's one I know particularly well in Newcastle that dance with a little a mascot of mine, a little round mascot that's well known from a particular movie. There's a story there, but I won't go into it tonight. And they dance with him every night at Port Stephens, and so I'm hoping that they're participating. I haven't actually looked at the list in detail to see whether they are, but I'm pretty sure they are. Yeah.
Well,
they're very complex.
For anyone who's in Port Stephens, because I have to say I have no idea what you're referring to. So. But
I'll give you a hint. His name's Wilson.
Okay.
He's quite famous. He's been around the world many times.
All right. Okay. I'm like, I think I know. I'm not sure. Maybe we have some of our attendees are more clued up in Australian culture than I am, probably. Look, and touching on the women sailing, you know, we did just going back to kind of stuff at Middle Harbour, and you know, Middle Harbour's implemented some women's sailing programs over the last few years. What kind of impact do you think those have had on, you know, female participation, and where do you see that going, and where would you like to see that going for the club?
Well, yeah, again, tough question really, because as you know, we've tried different formats. We've tried match racing, we've tried crew racing and things like that. What it boils down to is boat owners and skippers getting serious about it. And again, the ones that have been successful, in my view, have been the boat owners and skippers that have actually got behind that. And there's a few in our club that have actually got behind it. And what they do is they develop their female crew in what I'd call, let's not call it a lesser race, but a more social race like Twilights, where they've had all female crews running their boat. And then they develop those crews out of their boat and then graduate them to their bigger races. And I think that's the only way to go, is you've got to have people who truly believe that that they can sail their boats as well. I truly believe our sport is lucky. I think females can compete against men in this sport at all levels equally. You know, I've seen it, and they do extremely well. And I've seen some very, very well sailed boats. So look, it's a matter of commitment. We are committed. It's about organising events that run about it. As you know, I'm not sure whether you've done it in this format, Deb, but you know that women's sailing regatta we have every year has grabbed a great deal of attention, and it continues to develop. I think I'm right in saying the last one had about 23 to 25 boats.
Something
of
like that.
Order. Yeah, which I think's pretty good going for all female crews. If you average it out at 7 per boat, you know, there's 140, 150 people that are sailing very, very competitively over that period of time with that regatta. I think we need more of them. I'd also like to see more inter-club stuff on that area, and it is near and dear to my heart, and it's on the agenda to talk to other clubs about how do we do that. I think the She Sails program is a good one because it mentors women to, you know, right through. And from what I've seen of that, it's working well. And I'm really pleased that Australian Sailing got behind that. And I'd like to see more of that happening around the place. So look, it's like all these things. What gets worked on, what gets raised in profile, normally gets done. You've got to have the vision to make it happen, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of what you mentioned around the whole kind of getting people in with social sailing to, you know, help them train and learn. And that would go across the board for any new sailor, but in particular where, you know, we have an imbalance and we're trying to fix that imbalance, that's, you know, a good way to kind of try to bring more people in an environment that's not quite as stressful as going out, you know, on an offshore Saturday race or something with spinnakers. So bringing people in a less stressful environment and mentoring them, just like, you know, the new skippers, like you were mentioning, kind of bringing people in as skippers. So yeah, I know some really good thoughts there about how we can kind of grow, I guess, participation in the sport and grow female participation.
Yeah.
Look, so how about what's next for you besides the Breakout Series is obviously taking a lot of your time out, as we were chatting just before we started, and once the Breakout Series 2020 is done, what's next for Peter?
Yeah. So look, as I said to you, the blue water is kind of my shtick. I like the longer races. It's not just because you can set the spinnaker and go, but I do like the longer races. I like both. I like around the Cairns on Sydney Harbour, and Sydney Harbour to me is a beautiful place to sail. So I'll always do that. But the program for Savar, the boat behind me, we're talking about now, not finalised yet. But we're keenly looking at the Namia race next year, and then across to Hamilton Island. We'd like to probably go further north and maybe to Magnetic Island as well. So the boat will be away for a while in that, and then getting the boat back to Sydney. So that's the longer term program. Most people who know me know that I like a chat. so Twilight sailing is equally as much fun to do. And I've just come off a Wednesday race, and I've been doing Wednesday races for the last. Well, I've started doing Wednesday races probably for the first time, because somehow or other my Wednesdays never fitted around racing. I do all the feature events at Middle Harbour, which represents a lot of sailing. Basically, I'm sailing 2 or 3 days a week, and then on top of that, I'm trying to mentor a number of other Genoa crews to get their boats out and do things that they wouldn't normally feel comfortable doing. So, just as an example on that, I had someone who can sail but hasn't sailed for some time give me a call and said, "Look, I've just bought myself a new Genoa 42 deck saloon. Sorry, second hand, but it's new for him." And he said, "I'd really love to go back and visit Port Stephens again. How would I go about it?" So just with a few hours, now, as I say, he has a background in sailing, obviously. Well, not obviously, but he has a background in sailing. So, but by giving him some hints about how to get into Port Stephens, how to go about getting up there, all of those sorts of things, all of a sudden, all the things that were concerning him are gone, and off he's gone, and so much so that he said, "Oh, I've got to join your Breakout Regatta, because that sounds like a lot of fun. So I'll come back and I'll do that as well." So that kind of thing. So I often jump boats to help people, get themselves going, and I enjoy that. To me, the joy of getting people to do things that would probably be a bit outside their comfort zone. And as you well know, this is this is a grueling sport if you don't know how to do it well. It's less grueling if you do know how to do it well, but you tend to press the envelope a bit too. So you want people working always in with, I think, about 90% of their comfort level. So it's not all stress. It's fun, because it's supposed to be fun, and it's not always fun for a lot of people.
No, well, and like you said, with the confidence, I think that's really important, that you may know how to do something, or you just may not have that confidence. So if you can kind of build your confidence and really know, and then feel comfortable that then that in itself can make it so much more fun, can't it? Because you just don't have that stress of not being sure if that's the right thing to do, or if you're gonna, do something wrong. So
yeah. So the long term, it would be more of the same, Deb, and hopefully we can keep doing this for the next 40 years. Yeah, you can run this when I'm 25 or 26, in about 30 years time.
Yeah, okay. And the club's going back into normal racing in the kind of new season, or where do you see that going?
Well, as it happened, the last Commodore's get together that I've mentioned, I wasn't at because I had other commitments. But roughly, because we're trying to do it in lockstep with all the other clubs, as I mentioned. Mm-hmm. So we're going to Spinnaker sailing, and as you know, Spinnaker sailing's happening on Saturday. So our club, and everyone's doing it slightly differently, but I'm aware of what the other clubs are doing. Our club put together a truncated, what I'd call a truncated winter series. So we modulated our regattas to try and get people sailing and manage COVID rules and regulations and social distancing. So the first thing we did is we opened up Wednesday sailing, but we have everyone gathering on their boats, basically coming to our boats, going for the race, coming back, socialising on their boat, then going home. And so the club is open to a degree in that we're supplying drinks and some food and things like that, but we don't have the club fully open. And then Saturday racing's much the same, and that's a combination of sprint series and clubhouse starts racing. And then the Breakout Regatta is kind of like a signature event to say we're open. And then I'm planning probably the biggest opening day that I can possibly hope to get. And it's styled around Thank You Day, and that's on the 5th of September. And the aim there is to, again, celebrate opening up. We don't know yet where we're going to be, but it looks to me a bit like COVID restrictions will be again eased, hopefully. And if that's the case, it'll be a big party. And that's what we want it to be, to celebrate where we were. You mentioned, and I'm neglectful for not mentioning the 80 years. We were 80 years last year. The saying that I always use, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for people who did things 80 years ago, people I don't know, and people who did things 20 and 30 years ago, people, some of whom I do know, some of whom have passed, and some of whom haven't. I get my role as the custodian of that for a period of time to try and keep us on track to open up. I'm not sure that after COVID that things will ever be quite the same, but yeah, I'm hopeful that this summer season will be as much a normal summer season as we can hope for.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So, and I think too, it's important to mention that, as you said to me, all of the events for the Breakout Series, we're talking about the parties, but that, you mentioned previously that they will be designed around whatever the current regulations are for COVID-19 at the time. So as much as, you want to have a good party, it's going to be a safe party as well.
A safe party as well, that's right. So look, at one stage when we planned this, it could have been that we weren't even going to have people come off their boats. Mm-hmm. We were even going to limit the number of people on their boats to less than 5, etc. Thankfully, it's not quite as tight as that. So we were going to deliver food and alcohol and those sorts of things to the boats on the marina, and then off they'd go. Thankfully, we won't be having to do that, but obviously we still have to live within the rules. So that will be a moving feast, and we're meeting every fortnight to discuss what that may look like. But I'm reasonably hopeful that the functions will be of a fair size, because obviously if we get 60 boats, again, if you average it at 7 people, you've got sort of 420 people. So it's got to be legal. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So absolutely. Whatever we do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. Well, Peter, thank you so much for your time tonight and telling us, giving us so much insight into the club and into the events and what you're doing. It's been really interesting chatting with you, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you on the start line for the Breakout Series.
Sounds great, Deb. Just make sure you look at the stern there. See Savard? You'll be behind that.
I'm not going to see the stern of Savard at all. I'll be looking back, please.
Okay. Well, we'll see, huh?
Okay. We'll see. Thanks, okay. Peter.
See you, Deb.
And thanks everyone for joining us. Bye. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you'd like to know more about this program or the MySail app and community, head on over to mysail.team. That's MYSAIL.TEAM. Until next time, stay safe and happy sailing.